You see, when I resonate to anger, shame, hatred, or revenge, I add to these decidedly non-spiritual energies by joining in what I find to be so objectionable. But when I remember to bring non-judgment, love, tolerance, and compassion to these low, ego-dominated energies, I see how different the world looks, and even how different those around me act in the presence of these God-realized energies. I feel optimistic when I'm in spirit, with an inner knowing that nothing can interfere with an idea whose time is coming or has already arrived. I trust that our Creator knows what it's doing and that good triumphs over what ego believes is bad or evil. I sense that we're all moving toward a world that will no longer know the horrors of war or practice our long-established habits of inhumanity toward our brothers and sisters around the globe, who may have different cultural views and their own unique physical distinctiveness. By staying in spirit, I'm truly inspired to see the potential for greatness that's in all of us as one people, and I turn from anguish to faith that at least I can live from a place of God realization and practice being a force for good. Staying in vibrational alignment with spirit allows me to be more present in all of my life activities. Arriving seems to replace striving, and being in a state of flow is far more common than my old, uninspired state of worry and anguish. I remind myself that spirit is only here and now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, only now. By keeping my vibration aligned spiritually, I see the ecstasy in the present. Everything else that once was a source of worry doesn't come up for me, since the outcomes are already handled for me in my own mind. What will be, I remind myself. The world looks so much more peaceful when I approach it this way, and my ego, which once needed to win at all costs, is relegated to a distant seat in a stadium in another galaxy. The laws of the material world truly do not apply in the presence of God realization. And I know that I have the choice to live at this level of inspiration. When I do so, it seems that the world changes. Animals behave differently than their biological genetics would seem to allow. People at a distance seem to hear me telepathically and respond to my highest thoughts. Objects seem to materialize in defiance of what scientists say is possible. And healing takes place in spite of modern medicine saying otherwise. In other words, miracles seem to be ordinary. The world looks like a place where everything is possible, where restrictions and limitations are non-existent, and where the power of our Creator seems to roll right up and land at my feet, begging me to hop on board and witness the infinite possibilities it offers. This is how I feel when I align myself to spirit, cocky inside because I know something that so few ever come to realize, but humble and awestruck on the outside at the miraculousness of it all. When I remember to stay in spirit, I've realized that when one thing appears to be going wrong, I can see clearly that 10 things are going right. For example, if my cell phone isn't working, I can note that my health is fine, my family is safe, the ocean is calm for swimming, my bank account has a surplus, my electricity is fully functional, and so on, and on it goes. From a perspective of being in spirit, I automatically shift my attention away from what's going wrong and onto what's right. This then becomes my point of attraction, and I attract more of what I'm focused on, whereas at an earlier time in my life, I'd attract more of what was going wrong because that was my point of attraction. How sublimely beautiful the world now looks to me from this magnificent place of inspiration. No longer do I stay focused on and attract more of what's going wrong, for I've learned to place my attention on what's right, what's working, and what's aligned with the all-creating spirit. From this place of inspiration, I ask, what if I looked deep within myself and found no original sin at all? That is, what if I discovered original innocence instead? What if the same were true for everyone? I know that our creative source is one of good, and I also know that we must be like what we came from. Therefore, everyone, including myself, is a piece of God. We came to this world from innocence and love, not from a place of sin or weakness. When I see Christ consciousness in everyone, even those with whom I differ greatly, I'm able to feel good, to feel God. When I know that there's no original sin in anyone, I'm able to think like Mother Teresa, who told the world, in each person I see the face of Christ in one of his most distressing disguises. When it is goodness that I look for, rather than sin and weakness, that's what I see. I then see goodness in the little old lady driving slowly in front of me, the elderly man fumbling with his change and delaying me at the cashier, the children squealing loudly as I'm attempting to concentrate on a book, the teenagers shouting along with their ear-splitting rap music, or the jackhammer operator whose deafening sounds fill the air with chaos. When I'm inspired, I see God realization. disguised as a minor blip, and the world looks fine, happy, and even peaceful. I remind myself of Rumi's sage advice: if you're irritated by every rub, how will you ever be polished? When I feel inspired, I notice how much zest I have for life and everything that I do. I play tennis with exuberance and without fatigue. I write from my heart, and this inner feeling radiates outward in all of my waking moments. Inspiration means doing what I love, and even more significantly, loving what I'm doing. It's my willingness to bring love and passion to the activities of my life, rather than looking for love to emerge from those events and activities. It's an attitude, and knowing this, I remember to pick a good one as often as possible. I know that being enthusiastic feels good, and I also know that I have the choice to select these attitudes at any and all times. By staying in spirit, these outlooks on life become second nature to me.
I always said there's three ways to enlightenment. The first way to enlightenment, I call enlightenment through suffering. And enlightenment through suffering is, I am going to go through this experience. I can think of it from drinking, for example. And then I'm going to get through it, and then I'm going to look back on it. And as I look back on it, I'm going to realize after 10 years or so the benefit that I had in that, and I am going to grow from having suffered. It's enlightenment through suffering, which is not anything I recommend, but it's mostly the way that most people take. So we go through these storms and all of these difficulties and all of the stuff that we have to go through, and then we get to a place where we look back on it and we say, now I know why I had to go through that. You know? Now I know why I went through those addictions. Now I know why I went through those horrible relationship things, and I was always trying to be right and not being able to work it out. Now I know why I had to go through the poverty. Now I know why the accident came about. Now I know why the fire that destroyed this. I know why the illness came about. But I don't do it by what I call enlightenment through suffering any longer. I go a different direction now. And the direction that I go is the next level of enlightenment. And the next level of enlightenment is, while you are going through the storm, instead of saying, someday I will realize why I had to go through this, and I'll look back on it, and I will benefit from it. Instead of that, what I do is say, what's the lesson in this for me right now? What is it that I've attracted? Why have I attracted this into my life again? And I am going to get the lesson without having to go through a long period of suffering in order to understand it and explain it. So that's the second level, and that's one I would recommend to you as you start coming back to your place of origin, as you begin to reconnect to your source. I think that there is a way, there is a possibility of going through the things that we are told we're supposed to suffer from and not suffer at all. I think there's a way. I don't say that I'm there. And when you really get good at getting into the moment and being here now, as Ram Dass says, living from this moment and being just completely engulfed in it, whatever it is that your pain is, whatever you're thinking about, whatever, you know, there's a saying that says, I'm an old man and I've had many troubles, most of which have never happened. And most of the troubles and the suffering and the things that they are really thoughts, that all this suffering that you went through, you know, that it was all thoughts. It was just all thought. That we become what we think about, whether we want it or not. I mean, that's really the beauty of the work of Esther and Jerry Hicks and Abraham, is the power of our thoughts. This whole idea of reconfiguring our way of processing things in such a way that we don't have to suffer. Because I'm going to go to a third point. I haven't even gotten to the third one yet. Everybody has a story. Everybody has something that that takes place that they wish hadn't taken place. We still have within us the capacity, as Abraham often says, my not eating because there are children starving in Africa is not going to feed one child. My feeling guilty, like you can't get depressed enough to undepress another person. You can't get sad enough to make somebody else happy. But you can present yourself as a person who is aligned with Source in such a way that you are a God-realized soul, that when you are around a depressed person or a starving person, you give them hope. And that's what we need, is people who have a sense of hope and can elevate themselves because of the example. The third way to enlightenment, and that is what I call enlightenment by getting out in front of it and stopping it before it gets to you, anticipating it. As you get to a level of awareness that is so aligned with God, where you're thinking from a spiritual way at all times, seeing the unfolding of God, practicing reverence for life, the things I'll be speaking about when I speak about this meaning phase. As you get and begin to start to elevate your consciousness, what happens as you begin to elevate this, your intuitive nature begins to take over, and you begin to attract the right people and the right events and the right circumstances in your life. They just show up. And the right people, like when I decided to give up alcohol, when I decided to give up experimenting with certain drugs in my life, I remember still being tempted to go back to it. But as I was changing my conception of who I am, my concept of myself as a person, I would attempt to go back. I would find that the person that I was supposed to get the drugs from didn't show up. That it was like there was one more obstacle put between me and getting it, something that I didn't want to have anymore. Because addiction is nothing more than you never get enough of what you don't want. You never get enough of what you despise. And instead of my just going and making it easier, there'd be one more step, and then there'd be another step, and then I'd have to pause. And before you know it, it would be over. The temptation would be gone. And the right people would begin to show up. That's an extreme example. So now you can see it coming. And you get out in front of these things that used to cause you suffering, that you used to have to deal with in the present moment. And now, when they're on their way, you can deflect them. You can make them go away. I want to tell you something that I think will be very, very helpful to you. I want you to think about the troublemakers in your life. I want you to think about the troubled ones in your life. I want you to think about the ones in your life that are hooked on drugs. I want you to think about the ones who don't cooperate, the ones who don't fit in, the ones who perhaps are disrespectful, use language that you don't approve of, use substances that you find difficult, people that perhaps you work at. But mostly, I want you to think about people like that in your family. Now, I know that you think it's always somebody else, but they're thinking of you. And I want to tell you about how consciousness expands in every direction when you take these people who are your greatest teachers, the people who have come into your life to teach you how to love them through what it is that they're struggling with, what it is that they are going through. It's just, there's a need there, a need to be loved, that it's very difficult to love certain people under certain circumstances in certain ways, particularly when they behave in ways that are so troublesome to you. Anybody in your life who can push a button and send you into a frenzy is the person who's your greatest teacher. You know why? Because they teach you that you haven't mastered yourself at this moment. You don't know how to choose peace. In A Course in Miracles, there's a wonderful line that says, I can choose peace rather than this. Whatever it is, I can choose peace. I want to tell you about a woman, her name was Peace Pilgrim. Peace Pilgrim was a woman, an elderly woman who walked around the country, and all she did, dressed in white, was go into different communities and she would just talk about peace.
That's all she did. She talked peace wherever she went. And in the process of talking peace, there would be no ads, and no one knew her name. She was just called Peace Pilgrim. I believe there's a website about Peace Pilgrim today. And in her journal, Peace Pilgrim, this woman who devoted her life to peace, talked about the Bamemba tribe in South Africa. And I want to share this with you because this could be one way of returning spirit to the place in your home where there's emptiness, where there's hurt, where there's pain, where there's fear, where there's anger, where there's worry. In the Bamemba tribe, Peace Pilgrim says, when a person acts irresponsibly or unjustly, he or she is placed in the center of the village, alone and unfettered. All the work ceases. The entire village gathers around the accused individual. Then each person of every age begins to talk out loud to the accused. One at a time, each person tells all of the good things the one in the center ever did in his or her lifetime. Every incident, every experience that can be recalled with any detail and accuracy is recounted. All positive attributes, good deeds, strengths, and acts of kindness are recited carefully and at length. No one is permitted to fabricate, to exaggerate, or to be facetious about the accomplishments or the positive aspects of the accused person. The tribal ceremony often lasts several days, not ceasing until everyone is drained of every positive comment that can be mustered. At the end, the tribal circle is broken, a joyous celebration takes place, and the person is symbolically welcomed back into the tribe. Necessity for such ceremonies is rare. Now, I'd like to think about that in terms of what I learned since the family meeting that I called a decade or so ago. If I were to do it over, I would place this beautiful child in the center of that circle, and I would have everyone talk about the wonderful things about her, about however, wherever we go, she just always thinks about the downtrodden. Dad, can we just take some donuts out to these workers, these migrant workers? They never get to have just some, can't we just go over there? Come on, Dad, let's just take them some donuts. Can't we just do something nice for this person? I would tell them about the time that she went over on Mother's Day and bought a little trinket for her mom and wrote a little poem next to it. I would talk about how she made us laugh all the time when she was a baby, and with that little tongue of hers and the little words that she made up and that funny little way that she walked and her own sense of independence. And we would go on and on and on with this. And if we can teach those who are troubled, those who cause us pain, those who use language that we don't approve of, those who dress in ways, those who do things to their bodies that we don't think they should do, if we can just immerse them in a culture of acceptance and love, even if they're behaving in ways that seem so anathema to you, if you can just find a way to continue to do that, eventually that spirit has to raise, and your consciousness expands in every direction.